So between our first reading here and let's see here. Yeah, between our first reading here in the Gospel, we see the need for and an example of the three pillars of our Christian spiritual life that we practice during Lent, of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Here's Azariah, also known with his companions as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, in the book of the prophet Daniel. Of course, the king throws them into the fire, and in the fire, Azariah makes this prayer, and it's a prayer of humility. He's in the fire, he's burning up, and he doesn't say, "Lord, save me." He said, "Lord, we deserve this. We've been pretty crummy. But for your name's sake, free us from this torture," right? We'll see if we can find just a couple pieces here to pull out. "Do not take away your mercy from us for the sake of Abraham." So he's not saying, "Don't let me suffer," but he's saying, "Remember the promise you made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For we are reduced, O Lord, beyond any other nation, brought very low in the world this day because of our sins. We have no place to offer burnt offerings or incense. Essentially, we cannot and have not been practicing the faith. But with contrite and humbled spirit, let us be received." This is meant to be an example of the tone of all of our prayer. If we recall the parable that Jesus told of the two men who were in the temple praying, one was a Pharisee and he was in front and he's like, "Oh Lord, you are so big, so absolutely huge. Gosh, we're all really impressed down here. Thank you for making me a good and holy Pharisee." Just ignore that that heap of rags in the back who's praying, who's disturbing my prayer, who's making your temple dirty and filthy by his sinfulness and his scum. But thank you for me being so great, right? Versus the one who's in the back saying, "Lord, I've sinned," beating his breast. "Lord, I am a tax collector. Lord, I am a prostitute. Lord, I am a liar. Lord, I am a murderer. I am so sorry. I have taken the good thing that you've given me and I have ruined it. But I know you, Lord, can redeem it. You can bring it back." This is essentially what prayer is meant to be. It's the prayer of this man standing in a fire, not thinking so much about himself, but realizing his own wickedness, his own failure, and saying essentially, "Lord, I deserve this, but I can't handle this. It's for my sins. It's my fault. It's not the fault of the king who threw me in here. It's my own sin and the sin of my nation that I and we suffer as we do." The world tells you not to pay attention to your brokenness, not to pay attention to the things that cause you pain and suffering. But I say, as Christ says, as our God commends us, and as even Father Jack mentioned last night, pay attention to those sins. Pay attention to those places that are dark, because hiding them does not make them better. Showing them to the Lord allows Him to make them better. Right? This is the model of prayer. It's essentially also, if you pay attention to it and really look at it, it's nothing more than the Our Father, the prayer that Jesus teaches us to pray. Right? I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can go through that yourself because we've got two other pillars to get to. But just consider that. And then, in this prayer is garbage. Prayer means nothing if it is not accompanied with fasting. Okay, fasting is the thing that actually moves our prayer. Prayer is nothing more than an open line of communication. Our fasting is what speaks. Okay, the little button on the little CB radio that you push and then you can talk. Prayer is just the pushing of the button. It's opening up the line, right? The meat of our communication comes before the throne of God through our fasting. God hears us to the degree that we fast. He understands us to the degree with which we give our hearts in humility, not humiliation, but in humility and dependence on Him through our fasting. Lord, I am going to abstain from these good things that you might hear me. Lord, I am going to abstain from these good things that your name might be praised. Lord, I'm going to abstain from these good things that my body might get weak and I might feel the pangs of hunger to remember that I have been broken by sin and it is you and you alone for which my soul hungers. That is a prayer pleasing to God, and that only comes to us and leaves from us to the throne of God in fasting. And this is what essentially Azariah is looking at when he says, in our day we have no prince, prophet, or leader, burnt offering, sacrifice, oblation, or incense, no place to offer first fruits or to find favor with you, but with a contrite heart and a humble, that is to say, a broken spirit, let us come to you. When we consume and fill with a temporary reprieve the necessities of our hearts with worldly consolations, we cannot see the need of our dependence on God. We cannot feel our brokenness. It's essentially, it blinds us. And from time to time, it's necessary for us to take those blinders off so that we can see the world as it really is. We can see ourselves as we really are, and we can see our place in the world as it really is. Sinful, broken, and in desperate need of God, and in such having such a need that the world cannot satisfy it, and we have to find it somewhere else. We find it in God. That revelation comes to us in fasting. That's the only way it happens. When we, especially in a world, especially in a culture, and in a time and in a place, the degree to which we are so immersed in worldly pleasure and worldly comfort, we absolutely, it is more important today perhaps than any other time in the history of the church for us to have dedicated times of fasting. It is such a load of crock that we do not have a day of penance on Friday, that we do not live a day of penance on Friday anymore. It is such a danger to our souls that Friday is not kept each week as a day of refreshment of reality in preparation for Sunday. This weakening of our spirits by the bishops of the church who remove from us the good and necessary compulsion to do penance, because they just don't think that we will if they tell us to. It is still the ordinary practice of the church to abstain from meat on Friday, every Friday. That is still the universal normal practice of Christians throughout the world. Except in America, where we've been given a dispensation, which is silly because there was no need, right? Dispensations are really only ever given out of need. There was no need for this, but they gave it anyways. You don't have to abstain from meat on Sunday, or on Friday, but you still have to keep Friday a day of penance. Now, what does an American hear when they hear that? They only hear the first part. You don't have to abstain from meat on Friday. They do not hear the necessary, essential second part of that, which is you must do an alternate penance equal to the abstinence of meat on Friday. They don't hear that. And so we lose that day to day, that week to week, I should say, opportunity of a refresher of reality that comes to us through fasting. And it's only from that disposition, and then of course we have Lent, which is just become so watered down, right? You want to see how Lent's supposed to be done? Look at the Eastern Church, right? When fasting is defined as essentially the regular, normal way people eat in all the rest of the world, there's something wrong. One full meal and two snacks that don't together equal a full meal is the way that everyone in the world eats normally, except for Americans. How is that a fast then? Right? And this is the leadership that we have. It's not necessarily our fault. We can choose to be better. We can choose to be better than the minimum, right? We can choose to be better than the lowest common denominator that our leaders set before us. We can choose that. But when we don't, it's not something. I'm not sitting here to beat you over the head. I'm saying that that's a leadership. That's a failure of leadership. Says this is recorded. I don't care. I hope every bishop in the world sees this as a scathing accusation to their piss poor leadership. We suffer because of them, right? But we have a choice to do better. We can always do better than the minimum ourselves. So, prayer and fasting, and that fasting causes our prayers to ascend to Him. And then finally, here in the gospel, we see just this necessity of almsgiving, right? We have to recognize, and we recognize it through fasting. When we fast and we see how much we need God and how much He's given to us, man, what happens to us in that moment is what happens to this first servant, the one who owes a great amount, and we recognize to the Lord, I owe you way more than I could ever possibly pay back. The only hope I have of continuing my life is not, Lord, that you give me time to repay the loan, but that you forgive it, because I could have all the time in the world and I would never be able to pay this back. So I'm banking on you forgiving me. Not giving me time to pay it back, not giving me time to earn my place again, but just forgiving the debt. I need you to wipe it clean. When we fast, we get a recognition of that need. And a recognition that He has provided for that need. That He has indeed forgiven that debt. And so we go out into the world with an opportunity to either extend that same grace and mercy to others, or behave the way that this first servant behaved towards the second servant. Now I am strong again. Now I am no longer under the yoke of that debt. Now I have drawn power back to myself. Do I use it to tear down and to break down other people? Or do I use it to give away some of what has just been returned to me, restored to me? This is the fruit of almsgiving. This is the activity of almsgiving. And the fruit of almsgiving then is to be welcomed into the court of the Lord, who only moments before I owed a tremendous debt, and now I stand before Him as a free man. The alternative is to be brought back before Him, not in the shackles of death, but in iron shackles, or the shackles of debt, but in iron shackles. Not owing Him a monthly or a weekly repayment of that loan, but now owing Him the pains of my body before the torturer. Right? Almsgiving is therefore the most appropriate and necessary response to it is essentially the word of prayer that is thank you. That's essentially what it is. The degree to which we give alms is the degree to which we say to the Lord, thank you for what you've done for me. These three things, then, the Christian essentially relies upon. It's our support, it's our weapon, it's our defense, it's our communication to and before the Lord. Prayer and fasting and almsgiving. We focus on these during Lent. We really pay great attention to them during Lent, but they are meant for us to exercise every moment of every day of our entire life, so that in praying to the Lord, in recognizing our weakness through fasting and how He has provided for that weakness, and in sharing that great grace of God with others, we can stand in His presence in the kingdom of heaven, not as debtors, but as free men who belong there, who are welcome there, and who find in it a true home.